There comes a moment in your journey when God starts pulling you away from the noise, not because he's isolating you, but because he's identifying you. A moment when he says, daughter, son, I need you to hear me more than you hear them. And it's in that sacred quiet where your heart beats louder than the world's opinions that you start discovering who you were always created to be. When you focus on yourself, when you dare to silence the chaos around you and the chaos inside you, something divine begins to shift. Things that were tangled start loosening, things that were hidden start revealing, and things that felt out of reach begin aligning right in your path. Sometimes the breakthrough doesn't come through speaking, it comes through stillness. Sometimes the miracle doesn't show up in the crowd, it shows up in the quiet corners of your soul where God is doing his deepest work. And when you allow him to refine you in silence, everything, absolutely everything begins to fall into place. There is a version of you that God has been patiently waiting for you to meet, but you can only encounter her when the volume of the world is turned down enough for you to hear the whisper of heaven guiding you. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is strategy. It is the divine pause between who you have been and who you are becoming. When you step into silence, you are not stepping away from life. You are stepping toward clarity. You are stepping toward truth. You are stepping toward a revelation of yourself that noise has been drowning out for years. So many people are afraid of silence because silence exposes things the noise helped them ignore. Silence brings up the insecurities, the fears, the doubts, the fractured places of your identity that busyness could hide, but those are the very places where God wants to work. Those are the very places where transformation is born. When you become still, you give God permission to touch what distracts you, what distorts you, what dilutes your purpose. And in that stillness, layers start peeling back, layers you didn't even know you were carrying. Silence becomes a spotlight on your soul, revealing the wounds that need healing, the dreams that need reviving, and the strength that needs awakening. When you focus on yourself in a God-centered way, you stop measuring your worth by the noise of other people's opinions. You stop dancing for approval, running after validation, and shrinking to fit into rooms that were never designed to hold your destiny. Silence breaks the addiction to being seen while starving in secret. Silence breaks the addiction to being celebrated for what you do while neglecting who you are. Silence removes the pressure to perform and invites you to simply be. Because in the quiet, you realize that identity was never something the world was supposed to give you. Identity was something God had already placed inside you before you ever took your first breath. And when you sit with yourself long enough, you start hearing truths you forgot. You start remembering the strength you buried. You start recognizing the resilience you minimized. You start reclaiming the confidence you loaned out to people who didn't have the right to shape your self-worth in the first place. When God draws you into silence, he is not punishing you, he is positioning you. He is pulling you close enough for you to hear his heartbeat concerning you. He knows that noise creates confusion, and confusion creates misalignment. And misalignment makes you chase things that drain you instead of developing things that sustain you. But in silence, God becomes your compass. In silence, God becomes your anchor. In silence, God becomes the voice that redefines what value actually is. God will use silence to detox your spirit from voices that were never meant to guide your future. Some of the things you think you want are simply echoes of other people's desires projected onto you. Silence helps you separate their echo from God's voice. Silence frees you from external programming so you can hear internal purpose. Silence also reveals the parts of you that have been neglected. It shows you where you've been pouring too much and where you've been pouring too little. It shows you the dreams you allowed to dust over because life got heavy. It shows you the gifts you minimized because someone once told you they weren't worth much. It shows you the emotional bruises you covered because admitting you were hurting felt too vulnerable. But God allows silence so you can see yourself clearly again. You cannot heal what you refuse to face, and you cannot face what you keep drowning in noise. Silence is God's invitation to come into alignment with heaven's version of you, not the broken version the world tried to shape through disappointment and trauma. Silence is where God rewrites the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. And once God begins to realign your identity in the quiet, something powerful starts happening internally. Your spirit gets stronger, your mind gets clearer, your emotions stabilize, your discernment sharpens. You begin recognizing what is for you and what is not. You begin understanding which relationships bring peace and which ones disturb it. You begin seeing where you've been compromising in ways that have been costing you more than you realize. Silence teaches you how to choose yourself without feeling guilty. It teaches you how to protect your peace without apologizing. It teaches you how to walk away from what does not honor your purpose without second-guessing your decision. Because when God stabilizes your identity, He stabilizes every decision you make from that identity. Suddenly, things that confused you no longer move you. Things that hurt you no longer define you. Things that tempted you no longer pull at you. Silence gives God the space to rebuild you from the inside out. And when the rebuilding begins, alignment begins. Opportunities start making sense. Relationships start shifting. Clarity starts emerging. You start moving with intention instead of impulse. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop surviving and start becoming. Life doesn't fall into place because you forced it. It falls into place because you finally aligned with who God says you are. Silence is not about losing your voice. Silence is where you find the voice God always meant for you to carry. And when you carry that voice, you carry clarity, you carry identity, you carry purpose, and you carry authority. There are seasons when God begins to pull you away from people, environments, conversations, and patterns that once felt familiar, and at first it feels like loss, but in the spirit it is divine positioning. Separation is never random. Separation is strategic. God separates you when He's getting ready to elevate you. He separates you when the soil you've been planted in can no longer sustain the roots of who you are becoming. He separates you because the version of you that is emerging cannot grow in the same atmosphere that shaped your survival. And even though separation can feel lonely, misunderstood, or even painful, it is often the very place where God does His most transformative work within you. Not because you are unworthy of connection, but because your destiny requires a different type of alignment than the one you had before. When God allows separation, He is not removing people from your life as punishment. He is removing distractions so He can focus on your development. Separation does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like quiet distance. Sometimes it looks like no longer resonating with what once excited you. Sometimes it looks like conversations that don't hit the same. Environments that drain you instead of feed you, and relationships that no longer feel aligned with your growth. And instead of forcing you to cling to what is shifting, God invites you to surrender it, because preparation requires room, and sometimes you can't grow because your life is too crowded with things that are no longer connected to your next level. God will prune your circle. He will prune your habits. He will prune your thoughts. He will prune your desires, not because He's taking from you, but because He's making space for what He's about to give you. There are blessings that cannot land until certain weights are lifted. There are callings that cannot be activated until certain voices go quiet. There are breakthroughs that cannot unfold until the unnecessary is released. When God separates you, it is not just from others, it is often from the older version of yourself, the version of you that settled, the version of you that tolerated less, the version of you that made excuses, the version of you that hid behind weakness because strength felt too costly, the version of you that thought shrinking was safer than expanding. God will create a distance between who you used to be and who he's shaping you into. You may feel the tension of that transition, the discomfort of outgrowing things without fully stepping into the next thing. But that in-between space is not punishment. It is preparation. It is where God stretches your faith. It is where he enlarges your capacity. It is where he strengthens your voice. It is where he detoxes your life from attachments that were never meant to follow you into your purpose. The old cannot travel with you into the new, no matter how familiar it feels. Separation also reveals motives. When God starts shifting you, people around you begin to show who was attached to your purpose and who was attached to your presence. Some people celebrated you as long as you were accessible, available, and predictable. But when God elevates you into clarity and consecration, not everyone knows how to handle the version of you that chooses purpose over people-pleasing. Separation exposes what is seasonal and what is covenant. It exposes who was for you and who was just near you. It exposes who saw your calling and who only saw your convenience. And though those revelations may sting, they are necessary because God cannot allow you to carry dead weight into destiny. He cannot allow you to stay loyal to what he is trying to free you from. He cannot allow you to cling to relationships that dilute your purpose or environments that distract your spirit. Preparation requires purification, and purification often begins with separation. This season of separation is also where God begins to whisper instructions tailored for your next dimension. The silence you once avoided becomes the sanctuary where God downloads strategy. He begins to open your eyes to things you overlooked. He gives you ideas you never dared to imagine. He reveals dreams you pushed aside. He heals wounds you normalize. He strengthens your identity in ways that redefine how you see yourself. There are some instructions God could not give you when you were surrounded by noise. There are some revelations he could not release until he had your full attention. Separation becomes sacred because it positions you to hear God in ways you never have before. The clarity that comes in these seasons is not ordinary clarity. It is destiny clarity. It is the kind of clarity that shifts how you walk, how you speak, how you pray, and how you protect your peace. Separation is also where discipline is born. When you are isolated from distractions, you begin developing spiritual muscles you didn't know you had. You learn how to strengthen your boundaries. You learn how to stand firm in your worth. You learn how to choose purpose over comfort. You learn how to say no without guilt. You learn how to prioritize your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. You learn how to build routines that nourish you instead of patterns that drain you. God uses separation to refine your character so that when elevation arrives, you won't sabotage it with old habits. Preparation is God developing who you need to be in order to sustain what he's about to give you. Because elevation without preparation becomes a burden instead of a blessing. And God loves you too much to elevate you prematurely. Over time, separation starts to reveal itself as protection. You begin realizing that what felt like loss was actually deliverance. What felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like isolation was actually insulation. God was shielding you from opportunities that weren't aligned, relationships that would break you, environments that would limit you, and versions of yourself that would sabotage your growth. What you thought was a setback was God setting the stage. What you thought was an ending was God making room for a beginning. Separation was heaven's way of saying, I am preparing you for something that requires a different level of you. And even though you may not see it at first, separation is not God closing the door. It's God building the hallway that leads to the door that is meant for you. It is the womb of transformation where destiny is formed, character is developed, clarity is birthed, and identity is strengthened. Separation does not diminish you, it develops you. It does not break you, it builds you. It does not isolate you, it incubates you for the season God is preparing to release you into. There are cycles that have followed you for years, patterns that have shown up in different seasons, different relationships, different environments, but always with the same familiar ending. And for a long time, you thought the cycle was about the people, the circumstances, the resistance around you. But when you begin focusing inward, when you stop pointing outward and start looking within, you realize that the power to break the cycle was never out there. It was always inside you. Focusing inward is not selfish. It is spiritual responsibility. It is choosing to confront the things that have been running your life from the shadows. It is choosing to uproot the beliefs, behaviors, and emotional reflexes that have been repeating themselves like a script you never agreed to but learned too well. And God will keep bringing you back to yourself until you finally surrender to the work that transforms your inner world so your outer world can finally shift. Cycles are not broken by changing people. Cycles are broken by changing patterns. You can leave a relationship, a job, a community, and still find yourself in the same emotional loop because the real issue was never the environment. It was the unresolved part of you that kept recreating the same story. When you focus inward, you begin identifying where the cycle began. You begin recognizing the roots of your reaction. You begin understanding why you settle, why you silence yourself, why you self-sabotage, why you shrink, why you overextend, why you fear abundance, why you misinterpret love, why you repeat what hurts you. Focusing inward opens the door to healing that noise, busyness, and avoidance kept you from facing. And as soon as you face it, its power begins to break. There are emotional cycles that come from unhealed wounds. There are spiritual cycles that come from unbroken agreements you made with pain. There are mental cycles that come from the lies you internalized as truth. There are behavioral cycles that come from survival patterns you outgrew but never released. And the moment you turn inward with honesty, the moment you stop defending your dysfunction, the moment you choose transformation over pride, God begins to break the cycle piece by piece. He begins revealing the trauma that trained your triggers. He begins showing you the moments where fear built a cage around your confidence. He begins highlighting the places where you traded authenticity for approval. And in that revelation, freedom begins to rise. Focusing inward requires courage because you have to confront yourself without judgment, but with truth. You have to acknowledge the ways you participated in your own pain. You have to admit the habits that kept you stuck. You have to see the versions of you that developed as survival mechanisms, but no longer serve who you're becoming. But this kind of honesty is liberating because once you see something clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you refuse to lie to yourself, you stop living lies in your relationships, your decisions, and your spiritual walk. Focusing inward teaches you responsibility over blame. It teaches you ownership over avoidance. It teaches you intentionality over reaction. It teaches you that the battlefield has always been internal, and once you win within, everything outside must shift. Cycles also break when you heal your identity. Many of the external patterns you've been repeating are rooted in the stories you tell yourself. If you believe you're not enough, you'll accept less. If you believe you're too much, you'll shrink. If you believe you're unlovable, you'll tolerate mistreatment. If you believe you're replaceable, you'll overperform. If you believe you're destined for struggle, you'll sabotage breakthrough. But when you focus inward, God begins rewriting the narratives that shaped you. He begins revealing who you truly are beneath fear, beneath insecurity, beneath trauma, beneath comparison. Identity is the foundation of every cycle. Change the identity and the cycle loses its power. Focusing inward also exposes the emotional agreements you made unconsciously. The agreement that you must stay strong even when you're breaking. The agreement that you are responsible for everyone else's peace but your own. The agreement that you must earn love through sacrifice. The agreement that you cannot speak up or you'll lose acceptance. The agreement that success will cost you your authenticity. When you face those agreements, you can renounce them. You can release them. You can replace them with truth. Because cycles are sustained by agreements, but freedom is sustained by revelation. And revelation only comes when you look inward without shrinking from what you see. Cycles break when you learn to regulate your emotions instead of reacting from them. When you stop letting past wounds dictate present decisions. When you no longer allow old fears to drive new opportunities. When you respond from healing instead of hurt. Focusing inward strengthens your spiritual discernment because you begin to differentiate between a trigger and a warning, between intuition and insecurity, between conviction and condemnation. You stop confusing anxiety with discernment. You stop mistaking trauma responses for divine direction. You stop projecting old pain onto new possibilities. This kind of inner clarity dismantles the cycles that once manipulated your choices. And as you start doing the inner work, something miraculous happens. Your outer world begins to transform without you forcing it. People who were drawn to your brokenness no longer recognize you. Environments that once drained you no longer appeal to you. Opportunities that require you to shrink no longer tempt you. Boundaries that once felt scary now feel sacred. Your posture changes, your patterns change, your expectations change, your standards change. And because your internal alignment shifts, your external circumstances must shift with it. The cycle cannot survive when the version of you that sustained it no longer exists. Focusing inward also teaches you how to listen to the Holy Spirit with deeper sensitivity, because the more self-aware you become, the more spiritually aware you become. You begin recognizing God's nudges in moments where you used to be distracted. You hear his guidance in the pauses you once filled with noise. You sense his protection in the closed doors you once cried over. Inner work deepens your intimacy with God because it removes the clutter that kept you from hearing him clearly. And slowly, the cycle that once felt unbreakable starts losing its grip. The repetition turns into revelation. The confusion turns into clarity. The frustration turns into empowerment. Every inward breakthrough becomes an outward shift. And the more you choose to work on who you are, the more your life begins reflecting who God always intended you to be. There is a kind of confidence that doesn't need an audience, a kind of strength that doesn't need validation, a kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself to be real. It's the confidence that is birthed in silence. The confidence that grows when God has taken you through inner restoration so deep that the noise outside can no longer reach the places it once controlled. Quiet confidence is not loud, but it is unshakable. It is the posture of someone who has learned who they are in God so thoroughly that distractions lose their shine, fear loses its volume, and chaos loses its ability to pull you out of alignment. Quiet confidence is a spiritual armor that protects you from battles that aren't worth fighting and conversations that aren't worth engaging. It is the voice in your spirit saying, I don't need to prove anything because God already validated everything about me. Quiet confidence dismantles distractions because distractions are fueled by insecurity. When you are unsure of who you are, everything around you has the power to pull you off course. Every opinion feels like a verdict. Every criticism feels like a threat. Every delay feels like a denial. Every challenge feels like a sign you're not enough. But when God teaches you confidence that stands on truth instead of applause, distractions lose their authority. You no longer react to every opinion thrown your way because you know opinions cannot define what God has ordained. You no longer chase after approval because you know divine assignment does not require public agreement. You no longer feel the need to defend your progress because the God who called you. Quiet confidence is built when God delivers you from needing to be understood. So many spiritual distractions come from trying to explain yourself to people who were never meant to discern your calling, trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you, trying to justify your boundaries to those who benefited from your lack of them, trying to carry people who were never invested in carrying you. But when quiet confidence settles in your spirit, you stop trying to be heard by those who cannot listen. You stop trying to be validated by those who cannot see. You stop trying to be supported by those who are threatened by your growth. Quiet confidence teaches you to release emotional entanglements disguised as loyalty so you can walk freely in your purpose. Quiet confidence also dismantles spiritual distractions by anchoring you in discernment. When you are confident in God's voice within you, you stop chasing signs from everywhere else. You stop running to people for clarity that God is already speaking into your spirit. You stop asking for confirmation about things God already made clear. You become more sensitive to divine nudges and less reactive to emotional impulses. Distractions thrive on instability, but confidence rooted in God develops stability that cannot be shaken. You begin seeing distractions for what they are: detours designed to drain your energy, slow your progress, confuse your spirit, and weaken your focus. But when your confidence comes from a place of inner alignment, every distraction is exposed before it has the chance to attach itself to your destiny. Quiet confidence dismantles spiritual distractions because it removes the need for comparison. Comparison is one of the enemy's favorite tools because comparison creates spiritual blindness. When you are distracted by someone else's journey, you can't discern your own. When you are consumed with how far they are, you miss how far you've come. When you measure your worth by someone else's highlight reel, you lose sight of the divine blueprint God created specifically for you. But when your confidence is rooted in God's design for your life, you stop measuring your progress by someone else's pace. You stop comparing your anointing to someone else's assignment. You stop shrinking because someone else shines. Quiet confidence lets you stand in your lane with peace, knowing that what God has for you cannot be taken, delayed, or diminished by anyone else. Quiet confidence also dismantles spiritual distractions by silencing internal noise. External distractions are easy to identify, but internal distractions are subtle. They hide in your self-talk, your fears, your memories, your unhealed moments, your secret doubts. Quiet confidence doesn't just silence the world, it silences the war inside of you. It teaches you to challenge the lies you used to agree with. It teaches you to speak to yourself differently. It teaches you to respond to fear with truth. It teaches you to anchor yourself in God's promises instead of your past pain. When your inner language shifts, the spiritual atmosphere around you changes. The enemy cannot manipulate a mind that is anchored. The enemy cannot confuse a heart that is settled. The enemy cannot distract a spirit that is rooted. Quiet confidence is a byproduct of intimacy with God. You cannot fake it. You cannot manufacture it. You cannot perform it. It is cultivated in moments when it's just you and God. Moments when you have cried, surrendered, questioned, released, healed, and rebuilt. Confidence becomes quiet because God becomes loud inside of you. And once his voice becomes the loudest voice, distractions become powerless. You begin walking with an authority that does not require explanation. You begin moving with a grace that does not require permission. You begin living with intentionality that does not require validation. Quiet confidence dismantles spiritual distractions because it matures your vision. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding spiritually. You stop being triggered by everything that tries to provoke you. You stop stepping into battles that don't belong to you. You stop wasting energy on people who don't value it. You stop feeding what drains you. You stop giving attention to what God has already told you to ignore. Quiet confidence protects your calling, because it clarifies what deserves your attention and what does not. And slowly, without noise, without performance, without striving, you become someone the enemy cannot easily shake, the world cannot easily distract, and insecurity cannot easily weaken. Quiet confidence becomes your atmosphere, your armor, your alignment, your shield, your strength, your strategy. It becomes a silent force that keeps you grounded when everything around you tries to pull you away from who God is shaping you to become. There comes a moment when you realize that everything God has been doing in your life, the silence, the separation, the inward work, the confidence, has been leading you right back to yourself, not the wounded version, Not the weary version, not the version shaped by pressure, but the version he designed before life ever tried to rewrite your identity. And in this moment, I speak over you the strength to stand in that version with boldness. May you walk into this next season with a stillness that scares your doubts, a clarity that confuses your enemies, and a confidence so rooted in God that nothing can pull you out of alignment. You are stepping into a chapter where things begin to make sense, where the pieces start connecting, where the shifting finally reveals the purpose behind it. Everything falls into place when you do the inner work God has been calling you to do. Everything aligns when you align, and the same God who kept you through the breaking is the God who will crown you in the becoming. This time you're not walking in with noise. You're walking in with authority. You're walking in with identity. You're walking in with quiet, unshakable power. This is your season of divine alignment, and no one, absolutely no one, can stop what God has already started in you.